The phones wouldn't stop ringing. On the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, traders were screaming. On financial news networks, anchors were cutting each other off mid-sentence. On social media, a single name was trending in 43 countries: Micdan Capital, a $14 billion empire, one of the most respected hedge funds in the world. And in the span of 72 hours, it was gone. But the collapse wasn't what shocked people. It was who caused it. Because behind Micdan Capital were two brothers, Michael and Daniel Harris, two names that Wall Street had whispered like scripture for a decade. And somewhere in a penthouse, 40 floors above the chaos, one of them was sitting alone in the dark, staring at documents he wished he'd never found. This is their story. Michael Harris was born first, and he never let Daniel forget it. Not in a cruel way, in the way that older brothers carry the weight of the family's hope without being asked. He was the one who stayed up reading financial newspapers at 16, while other kids were at parties. The one who told Daniel at 17, "The money isn't in working for people. The money is in making people work for your money." Daniel would laugh and say Michael sounded like a motivational poster. Michael would say, "Laugh now." They grew up in Baltimore, in a house where the heat sometimes didn't work in winter, and their mother worked 2 jobs without complaining. Their father had made a bad investment in a restaurant that failed, and the shame of it followed him like a shadow until the day he left. Michael never talked about it. Daniel never forgot it. Both of them, in different ways, decided that poverty was a problem they were going to solve, permanently. Michael was the vision. Daniel was the math. Michael would walk into a room and make people believe in things that didn't exist yet. Daniel would walk into a room and make sure those things could actually be built. Together they were complete. Apart, they were each missing something they couldn't name. In 2009, with $40,000 in combined savings and a rented office above a printing shop in Brooklyn, they launched Micdan Capital. The name meant nothing. The ambition behind it meant everything. Their pitch was simple: use data-driven analysis to find undervalued positions in mid-cap financial markets before institutional money moved in. It was not a new idea. But the way Michael sold it, and the way Daniel proved it with numbers, made investors feel like they were being let in on a secret. The first year was brutal. They lost 2 major investors before Christmas. A third threatened to pull out after a bad quarter. There were weeks when Michael slept on a cot in the office because he couldn't justify the cab fare home. Daniel ran the numbers at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, searching for the error, the gap, the thing he was missing. One night in February, he called Michael and said, "I think we should take the offer from Meridian. They'll pay us out. We can walk away clean." Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "If we sell now, we'll spend the rest of our lives working for the man who bought us. Is that what you want?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Then, "No." "Then we don't sell. We rise together. Always." That became the phrase between them. Not a slogan, a contract. They said it at the end of serious conversations. They said it when things went wrong. It was the foundation everything else was built on. And for a long time, it held. By 2013, Micdan Capital had $800 million in assets under management. By 2016, it crossed $4 billion. The hedge fund had cracked the code on a proprietary strategy that consistently returned 18 to 22% annually, and the financial press couldn't write about them fast enough. Forbes called them the Brothers of Wall Street. Bloomberg ran a profile with a photo of them standing on the roof of their new Manhattan headquarters, the city spread out behind them like something they'd purchased. Michael wore it well. He was made for that world: the dinners, the conferences, the handshakes with men who ran countries. He moved through power with the comfort of someone who'd always believed he belonged there. He started collecting art. He bought a plane. He gave speeches at Davos that made billionaires lean forward in their chairs. Daniel stayed quiet. He was never comfortable in the spotlight, but he didn't need it. He had the numbers, and the numbers were extraordinary. While Michael was building the brand, Daniel was building the machine. He hired the best analysts. He designed the risk protocols. He was the reason the fund worked. And he knew it, which was fine, until he started to feel like no one else did. The tension, when it came, didn't arrive in a single moment. It arrived slowly, the way winter arrives. You don't notice it until suddenly everything is cold. It started with a deal. In early 2019, Michael came to Daniel with an opportunity, a leveraged position in an emerging market tech consortium based out of Singapore and Dubai. The potential return was extraordinary. The risk was also extraordinary. Michael had already been in conversations with the lead investors for 3 months. He'd already made commitments, informal ones, he said, but commitments nonetheless. He wanted Micdan to put $2.1 billion into the position. Daniel read the proposal 3 times. Then he looked up and said, "Michael, this is 40% of the fund. I know what it is. If this goes wrong, it won't go wrong. You don't know that. I know the people involved. I know the structure. I've stress-tested the—" "You stress-tested it with their numbers," Daniel said. "Not ours." He slid the proposal back across the desk. "I need 30 days and our own due diligence team before I sign off on anything. That's not negotiable." Michael stared at him. Something shifted in his face. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. "We've never moved this slow before. We've never risked this much before." They didn't speak for 2 days after that meeting. When they did, it was about something else entirely, and neither of them brought it up again. But Daniel noticed something in the weeks that followed. Small things. An analyst he'd never met attending strategy calls. Calendar invites that didn't include him. A closed-door meeting with the fund's legal team that Michael casually mentioned only after the fact. Daniel told himself it was nothing. He was wrong. It was a Tuesday in March when Daniel found the documents. He wasn't looking for them. He'd come into the office earlier than usual, to review a quarterly report before a board meeting. The filing system at Micdan was meticulous, which is why the unmarked folder stood out. It was sitting on the wrong shelf, behind a binder of archived compliance records. Daniel almost walked past it. Something made him stop. He opened it. Inside were 14 pages. Legal language, dense and precise. He read the first page standing up. Then he sat down slowly, the way a man sits when his legs stop working. He read the next page, and the next. By the time he reached the end, the room felt different, smaller, colder, like the walls had moved while he wasn't watching. The documents were a share restructuring agreement, signed 6 weeks ago. What it meant, stripped of the legal language, was this. Through a series of quiet maneuvers, Michael had reclassified a block of founding shares in a way that reduced Daniel's voting power from 46% to 11%. The deal with the Singapore-Dubai consortium had gone through, not through Micdan's standard approval process, but through a newly created subsidiary that only Michael controlled. And the 14-page document in Daniel's hands was the mechanism that ensured that if anything went wrong, Daniel couldn't stop it. His brother had done this while shaking his hand, while having dinner with him, while saying we rise together like it still meant something. Daniel sat in that office for 45 minutes without moving. Then he picked up the phone and called the one person he trusted outside the firm, a corporate attorney named Jack Webb, who'd advised them both in the early years. "Jack," he said. His voice was completely flat. "I need you to look at something today. Not tomorrow. Today." By that evening, Webb had confirmed everything Daniel already knew. "He's boxed you out," Webb said carefully. "Legally, technically, he's positioned himself to make decisions without your consent. If the consortium deal collapses, you're exposed. If it succeeds, you get almost none of the upside. Either way, you're no longer running this company. You're just attached to it." "Can I stop it?" "There are options. But Daniel, If you move, you have to move fast. And you have to be certain you want to do this. Because once you do, there's no version of this where you two come back from it. Daniel was quiet. He thought about Baltimore. He thought about the cot in the Brooklyn office. He thought about a phone call in February a decade ago. We rise together, always. And how much he had believed it. How much he had built his entire life around it. Then he thought about the 14 pages. "Tell me the options," he said. What happened next moved at the speed of finance, which is to say it was invisible until it was catastrophic. Over the following 9 days, Daniel executed a legal countermaneuver that his attorney had built around a dormant clause in Micdan's original partnership agreement, one that predated every restructuring Michael had engineered. It allowed a founding partner to trigger a governance review if fiduciary irregularities could be demonstrated. Daniel demonstrated them, in extraordinary detail. On a Thursday morning in April, Michael walked into the Micdan boardroom for what he'd been told was a routine investor call, and found instead a room full of attorneys, a letter from the fund's independent directors, and his brother sitting at the head of the table. "Daniel." Michael's voice was careful, measured. "What is this?" "Sit down, Michael." "I'm not going to." "Sit. Down." Something in Daniel's voice made him sit. For the next 2 hours, Daniel laid out everything. The share restructuring, the subsidiary, the consortium deal that had been pushed through without board approval. He spoke without emotion, the way he ran numbers, precisely, relentlessly, without gaps. The independent directors listened in silence. Michael's attorney arrived 30 minutes in and spent the rest of the meeting whispering urgently in his client's ear. At one point, Michael looked across the table at his brother and said, quietly, so that only Daniel could hear, "You're really doing this." Daniel didn't look away. "You did this first." "I was protecting the firm. The deal was right. You were slowing everything down because you needed to control." "I needed to know," Daniel said. "I needed us to decide together. That's all I ever asked." Michael shook his head. His jaw was tight. "If I'd waited for you to approve everything, we'd still be in Brooklyn." "Maybe," Daniel said, "but we'd still be brothers." The room went completely silent. By the following Monday, the news had broken. A source, never identified, had leaked documents to 2 financial journalists simultaneously. The story ran with the headline, "Micdan Capital in Civil War, Founding Brothers in Legal Battle Over $14 Billion Fund." Within hours, 3 of their largest investors had issued notices of withdrawal. By midweek, the consortium deal had collapsed, not because of anything Daniel had done, but because the internal chaos had spooked the counterparties in Dubai, who had their own exposure concerns and no appetite for a firm that was eating itself alive. The fund's value dropped 40% in 6 trading days. Employees who had worked at Micdan for years found out their jobs were gone from a push notification. Michael gave one statement, brief and controlled, in which he said he had always acted in the best interest of the firm. Daniel gave no statement at all. The lawsuits were filed. The lawyers took over. And the empire that 2 brothers had built from nothing, from a rented office above a printing shop in Brooklyn, from bad winters and borrowed money and a promise made at 2 a.m, was dismantled piece by piece. Here is what almost no one knew. 3 weeks after the story broke, a financial investigator hired by Micdan's independent directors uncovered something that changed the shape of everything. The source of the leak, the unnamed person who had sent documents to both journalists at the same moment, had done so from an account traced back to a private equity firm called Greyholm Partners. Greyholm had been making quiet moves to acquire Micdan's most valuable assets for 18 months. They had seeded the conflict, not created it. The conflict was real. The wounds were real. But they had watched 2 brothers build tension for years, and when the moment came, they had lit the match. Michael hadn't betrayed Daniel for power. He'd made a reckless decision out of ambition and failed to trust his brother with the truth. Daniel hadn't destroyed the empire out of revenge. He'd done what he always did. He'd looked at the numbers and tried to protect what they'd built. Two men, each certain they were right, each certain the other had broken something first. And a third party, patient and invisible, had made sure neither of them ever found out they were being played until it was far too late. The boardroom was empty now. 2 chairs, a long table, morning light across the floor. Empires aren't destroyed by enemies. They fall from within, from the moment trust becomes a risk no one wants to carry, from the silence between 2 people who once said we rise together and meant every word of it. If this story hit different, drop a comment below. Tell me which brother you think was right. And if you want more stories like this, empires built, broken, and buried, subscribe to Wealth Chronicles TV. Like this video. Share it with someone who understands that the most dangerous battles are never the ones the world sees. Every empire has a story. This was theirs.